The blinking cursor rhythmically taunts you from the center of a blindingly white screen. Your finger hovers over the keyboard, but instead of typing a new sentence, you hit the backspace key for the 20th time today. You stare blankly at a to-do list that seems to mark your ambitions, aggressively crossing out items in a wave of mounting frustration. You have a vision of something incredible you want to create, build, or achieve. Yet, the moment you sit down to actually manifest it in the real world, you completely freeze. This invisible wall you hit every single time is known as perfectionism paralysis. It is the incredibly frustrating phenomenon where your obsessive desire to do something flawlessly, literally, prevents you from doing it at all. You convince yourself that if you just read one more book, buy one more piece of equipment, or wait for the perfect burst of inspiration, you will finally be ready. But that perfect moment never arrives, and your grand visions remain trapped inside your head. The self-loathing that follows is usually swift and brutal. You call yourself lazy, undisciplined, or an imposter who simply lacks the willpower to succeed. But what if the reason you cannot start has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of discipline? What if the true source of your paralysis is a profoundly flawed definition of your own responsibility? Welcome to part one of our three-part series on dismantling the trap of perfectionism. The antidote to this modern epidemic of creative block and chronic burnout isn't a trendy new productivity hack. It certainly isn't a complex time-blocking app or a motivational speech urging you to just hustle harder. The cure we are looking for is actually buried deep within a 2,000-year-old Jewish text. This compilation of ethical teachings is known as Pirkei Avot, or Ethics of the Fathers. Passed down through generations, it contains a profound psychological truth regarding human effort and expectation. This ancient wisdom has the power to completely rewire how you approach your work, your art, and your daily life. It offers a radical perspective shift that strikes at the very core of why we freeze in the face of our own ambitions. Before we can apply this ancient cure, we have to deeply understand the mechanics of the disease. Why exactly does the desire to be perfect cause us to shut down entirely? It all comes down to a toxic, modern obsession with the final outcome. When we contemplate starting a new project, our minds rarely focus on the messy, chaotic middle of the process. Instead, we instantly project ourselves to the grand finale. We imagine the best-selling novel sitting proudly on a bookstore shelf. We picture the flawless business launch generating immediate revenue or the perfectly sculpted physique after months of training. Our ego aggressively latches onto this idealized, pristine final product. It becomes the only acceptable metric for success. The problem is that your ego is terrified of the gap between your current abilities and that flawless final vision. The ego whispers that if you cannot absolutely guarantee the end result will be a masterpiece, it is much safer to simply not begin. This is not high standards. This is the ultimate psychological defense mechanism against failure. If you never actually start the work, you never have to face the painful reality of a mediocre first attempt. Psychologists refer to this destructive mental framework as all-or-nothing thinking. In the mind of the perfectionist, the world is strictly binary. There are only two possible outcomes for any endeavor: spectacular, world-changing success, or complete, humiliating failure. There is no gradient, no learning curve, and no grace given for the necessary awkwardness of growth. The sheer weight of having to produce a flawless final result right out of the gate is crushing. It demands an impossible standard from a flawed human being. When you believe that anything less than perfection is a failure, your brain interprets the project as a massive threat to your self-worth. It triggers a stress response, shutting down your creative faculties and leaving you entirely paralyzed. This brings us to the ancient paradigm shift that shatters the all-or-nothing illusion. In the text of Pirkei Avot, a revered sage named Rabbi Tarfon offers a single sentence that fundamentally changes the rules of engagement. It is a profound philosophical statement regarding the true nature of human duty. He states, "Lo, alecha, hamlacha, ligmor." Translated from Hebrew, this powerful phrase means, "It is not your duty to finish the work." Let the sheer weight of those words sink in for a moment. It is not your duty to finish the work. For a chronic perfectionist, this statement is both entirely radical and deeply unsettling. We have been deeply conditioned by modern hustle culture to believe the exact opposite. We are taught that our worth as human beings is entirely tied to crossing the finish line. We operate under the assumption that if we are the ones starting a project, the burden of its ultimate completion rests squarely and solely on our shoulders. We believe we must be the alpha and the omega of every task we undertake. Rabbi Tarfan's ancient wisdom completely removes the fragile ego from the equation. It gently but firmly reminds you that you are not an isolated island of productivity. You do not have to be the sole architect, builder, and finisher of the grand vision. Your responsibility is not to guarantee the final, polished outcome that you see in your head. Your only actual job is to simply move the needle forward from where it currently sits. When you internalize the fact that finishing is not your ultimate duty, the immense pressure of the perfect final product instantly evaporates. You are suddenly allowed to just be a worker, a contributor, and a participant in the process. You no longer have to write the definitive masterpiece today. You just have to write a single, honest paragraph. You don't have to build $1 million empire by tomorrow. You just have to send one email. The crushing burden of completion is permanently lifted from your shoulders. In its place, you find the glorious, unburdened freedom to simply begin. We need to put this ancient wisdom into practical application immediately. I want you to identify one specific project in your life right now that currently has you paralyzed. It could be a business idea, a fitness goal, a messy room, or a creative endeavor that has been collecting dust in the back of your mind. Grab a pen and write the name of that exact project down on a piece of paper. Now look at the grand, intimidating, final goal you have attached to it. Take your pen and physically draw a thick line right through that ultimate outcome, crossing it out entirely. Beneath that crossed-out expectation, I want you to write down two simple words. Step 1. That single step is your only jurisdiction now. You are officially relieved of the overwhelming duty to finish that massive project. However, you are now completely empowered to take that very first, messy, imperfect step. You no longer need to see the finish line to justify starting the race. I want to hear about the specific battles you are fighting with this mindset right now. Scroll down into the comments and tell me exactly what project you are currently paralyzed by. Let's shine a light on these hidden burdens so we can begin to tackle them together as a community. But wait, this profound realization raises a massive, unavoidable question. If it is truly not your duty to finish the work, does that mean you have permission to just walk away? Can you simply quit when the process gets boring, difficult, or uninspiring? Not exactly. Join me in part 2, where we will uncover the vital, uncompromising second half of Rabbi Tarfan's ancient quote. We will explore why the opposite of perfectionism is not laziness, but something far more demanding. I will show you exactly how to break your inertia and take action when you feel completely overwhelmed. So, you have officially let yourself off the hook. You crossed out that massive, intimidating final goal on your piece of paper, and you breathed a heavy sigh of relief. If you are not actually obligated to finish the great American novel, build the Fortune 500 company, or achieve a state of total spiritual enlightenment, a dangerous new thought immediately creeps in. Why bother starting at all? If the burden of completion is gone, what is stopping you from just closing the laptop and turning on the television? This is the ultimate loophole that your clever, self-sabotaging brain tries to exploit. It is a psychological trap that catches recovering perfectionists off guard every single time. When we finally drop the impossible standards we have been clinging to, the pendulum often swings violently in the exact opposite direction. We go from caring obsessively about every microscopic detail to suddenly not caring at all. This sudden, heavy wave of indifference is not freedom, it is apathy. Apathy is the insidious shadow side of the perfectionist mindset. It convinces you that if you cannot be the glorious, triumphant finisher of a project, then your minor contributions are entirely worthless. Your ego throws a quiet tantrum, whispering that if it cannot have all the glory of a flawless victory, it refuses to play the game altogether. You convince yourself that taking small, messy steps is beneath you or simply a waste of time. This is how the paralysis morphs from a state of frozen anxiety into a state of comfortable laziness. The opposite of perfectionism is not lazily floating through life without ambition or discipline. The true antidote requires something far more gritty, resilient, and demanding of your daily character. It requires the immense courage to show up and do mediocre work when your taste level demands excellence. It means pushing through the uncomfortable friction of being a beginner over and over again. This brings us directly to the brilliant, uncompromising second half of Rabbi Tarfon's ancient proverb. We already know the liberating first clause. It is not your duty to finish the work. But the wisdom does not stop there, and it certainly does not let you off the hook of personal responsibility. The sage immediately follows it with an absolute non-negotiable anchor, Vilo ata ben korin el hibatel mimna. Translated, this powerful phrase means, but neither are you free to desist from it. You are not free to walk away. You are not permitted to abandon the effort simply because the finish line is out of sight or the task feels insurmountable. This single, compound sentence provides the ultimate, perfect balance for the complex human psyche. The first half completely relieves you of the crushing burden of the final outcome. The second half definitively binds you to the daily, unglamorous obligation of the process. Think of it like being tasked with constructing a massive, awe-inspiring cathedral. If you stare at the empty plot of land and obsess over the millions of architectural details required to finish the building, you will collapse under the anxiety. The first half of the quote tells you that you do not have to build the entire cathedral yourself. The second half of the quote looks you dead in the eye and hands you a heavy trowel. It demands that you mix the mortar, pick up a single brick, and lay it firmly in the dirt today. You are entirely responsible for the brick. You are completely absolved of the cathedral. This is the profound mental shift that breaks the inertia of perfectionism and transforms it into unstoppable momentum. When you detach your self-worth from the final product and attach it entirely to the act of showing up, you become incredibly dangerous. You stop judging your day by what you finished, and you start judging it by what you initiated. So, how do we actually operationalize this ancient wisdom in our highly distracted modern lives? How do we force ourselves to lay that single brick when the couch is comfortable and the fear of making a mistake is still lingering? It starts by giving yourself radical, unconditional permission to create absolute garbage. You have to actively embrace the liberating mindset of the ugly first draft. When you sit down to write, paint, code, or build, your only objective is to make a mess on the canvas. You must brutally silence the inner critic that demands a polished product on the first attempt. A sculptor cannot carve a masterpiece out of thin air. They need a massive, ugly lump of clay sitting on the table first. Your messy, imperfect, wildly flawed initial effort is simply you gathering the raw clay. You cannot refine, edit, or improve something that does not yet exist in the physical world. To bypass the brain's resistance to this messy process, you can utilize a highly effective psychological tool known as the 5-minute rule. When you feel the familiar wave of paralysis washing over you, make a binding contract with yourself. You are only going to work on the intimidating project for exactly 5 minutes, and then you are legally allowed to quit. You are drastically lowering the barrier to entry so that your brain no longer perceives the task as a massive, energy-draining threat. The magic of the 5-minute rule is that it directly targets the physics of human motivation. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest, but objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Once you overcome the initial, agonizing friction of starting, the momentum almost always takes over. You will often find yourself looking up at the clock an hour later, completely immersed in the very task you were terrified to begin. Your only job was to simply touch the work today, and you successfully tricked your brain into doing exactly that. It is time to take this philosophy out of the abstract and force it into your reality right now. We are going to execute a practical exercise called the 15-minute brick. I want you to recall that specific, paralyzing project you identified and wrote down previously. You're going to set a hard timer on your phone for exactly 15 minutes of uninterrupted, highly focused effort. During these 15 minutes, there is a strict, zero-tolerance policy for editing, judging, or deleting your work. If you are writing, your fingers do not stop moving across the keys, even if the sentences make absolutely no sense. If you are organizing a room, you do not stop moving items, even if you are just blindly throwing things into a trash bag. If you are working on a business plan, you just brain dump every terrible, half-baked idea onto the paper without a single second of critical analysis. You are not trying to complete a milestone, and you are certainly not trying to produce something good. You are simply fulfilling your ancient, non-negotiable obligation to not desist from the effort. When that timer goes off, you are allowed to step away with your head held high, knowing you successfully laid your brick for the day. You have proven to your nervous system that you can survive the discomfort of taking imperfect action. You now possess the exact formula to start any intimidating endeavor without the crushing pressure of having to finish it. You know how to break the paralyzing grip of inertia and pull your grand visions out of your head and into the real world. But a new, formidable challenge quickly emerges on the horizon. How do you sustain this messy, brick-by-brick process over the course of an entire lifetime without eventually burning out? How do you maintain your motivation when the initial excitement fades and the daily grind becomes monotonous? The answer requires us to zoom out from our individual daily struggles and look at the massive, overarching timeline of human existence. That is exactly what we will uncover in the grand finale, Part 3. Think about the most massive, seemingly impossible goals you harbor deep within your soul. Maybe you want to eradicate a systemic societal injustice, master a complex and demanding art form, or finally break a cycle of generational trauma that has plagued your family for decades. These are not weekend projects. These are monumental, life-defining mountains to climb. The perfectionist mindset looks at these massive undertakings and whispers a very specific, toxic lie. It tells you that if you do not personally see the absolute, flawless completion of these goals within your own lifetime, your efforts were entirely in vain. This arrogant assumption is exactly why so many brilliant, capable people burn out halfway through their journey. We mistakenly believe that the timeline of our personal success must perfectly align with the timeline of our mortal lives. But to truly sustain the grit required to lay your daily bricks, we must put both halves of Rabbi Tarfon's ancient proverb together. It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. This complete thought forms the foundational bedrock for a much broader, deeply profound Jewish concept known as Tikkun Olam. Translated, Tikkun Olam means repairing the world. It operates on the fundamental premise that the world we inhabit is inherently fractured, messy, and broken. More importantly, it acknowledges that the monumental task of repairing it is a multi-generational project that extends far beyond the lifespan of any single human being. You are not meant to heal the entire world, fix your entire industry, or perfectly resolve your family's history all by yourself. You are merely one vital link in a massive, unbreakable continuum of human effort. When you apply the lens of Tikkun Olam to your personal ambitions, the timeline of your goals radically shifts. You begin to understand that your life's work is not a self-contained movie where you must play the hero who saves the day before the credits roll. Instead, your efforts are part of a sprawling, epic narrative that started long before you were born and will continue long after you are gone. This is not a reason to despair. It is the ultimate liberation from the tyranny of the ticking clock. The chronic perfectionist insists on running an entire ultramarathon completely alone, demanding to cross the finish line in first place, while the crowd cheers their individual glory. Healthy, sustainable creators adopt a completely different paradigm entirely. They view their life, their art, and their work as a grand, ongoing relay race. In a relay, your only responsibility is to run your specific leg of the race with as much heart, vigor, and dedication as you can possibly muster. When you enter this world, you are handed a baton. That baton consists of the knowledge, resources, privileges, and current skill levels passed down to you by those who ran before you. Sometimes that baton is handed to you smoothly, and sometimes it is dropped in the mud, requiring you to painstakingly pick it up and clean it off. Your duty is simply to carry that baton forward through the unique, challenging terrain of your own life. You take imperfect action, you learn, you stumble, and you make whatever progress you possibly can. Eventually, your leg of the race will naturally come to an end. At that moment, you do not weep because you didn't reach the final, ultimate finish line of human progress. Instead, you proudly pass the baton to the next person, to the next generation, or even to a future version of yourself. You impart your lessons, your half-finished manuscripts, your growing businesses, and your healed traumas to those who will follow. They will take your imperfect progress and build their own magnificent successes upon it. Embracing this relay race philosophy is the secret key to achieving lasting peace of mind in a hyper-competitive world. It answers the agonizing question of how to go to sleep at night feeling genuinely satisfied, even when your to-do list is miles long. When you finally accept that finishing the grand, cosmic project is not your job, but participating in it is your sacred duty, you unlock a superpower. You unlock the ability to be truly, remarkably consistent. Consistency is the natural byproduct of releasing the heavy burden of finality. You no longer lie awake at night violently beating yourself up for all the tasks that remain undone or the milestones you haven't yet reached. Instead, you close your eyes and take deep, quiet pride in the simple fact that you showed up and moved the needle today. You find absolute peace in knowing that your effort was enough. Enough is a word that the perfectionist's vocabulary aggressively rejects. But in the framework of Tikkun Olam, enough is a beautiful, necessary reality. It means you laid your brick with intention, you ran your leg of the race with honor, and you respected your obligation not to quit. Tomorrow, you will wake up and do it again, not out of frantic anxiety, but out of a calm, steady devotion to the process itself. We have traveled a long way through this psychological and philosophical landscape. To permanently dismantle the trap of perfectionism paralysis, you must anchor yourself to three core principles. First, you must completely drop the ego-driven need to finish the work flawlessly. Second, you must boldly commit to the messy, unglamorous process of laying a single, imperfect brick every day. Finally, you must zoom out and see yourself not as a solitary failure, but as an essential participant in a much larger chain of human progress. To cement this mindset shift into your daily reality, I have a final challenge for you. I want you to grab a physical sticky note and a thick marker right now. Write down these exact words: not my duty to finish, not free to quit. Take that sticky note and place it directly on your computer monitor, your bathroom mirror, or the dashboard of your car. Let it serve as a daily, visual disruption to the toxic all-or-nothing lies your brain tries to tell you. When you look at that note, remember that your only job is to simply engage with the work in front of you today. The world does not need your flawless completion. It desperately needs your courageous participation. Thank you so much for joining me on this three-part journey to reclaim our ambitions from the grip of perfectionism. If this series resonated with you, please share it with a fellow creator or friend who is currently paralyzed by their own high standards. And be sure to hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into how we can use ancient wisdom to navigate our modern lives.